Hey guys, it's Camryn here to review The Dropout. And this show, we focus on the true story of Elizabeth Holmes. She started off as this young, woman who was in college and was very much obsessed with like biotech and wanting to be the new Steve Jobs. And so one day she comes up with this idea, drops out of college, and goes on to create this company, Theranos. But this company is not a very well-run company at all. It is very unethical what is going on. There is a lot of fraud going on. There is a lot of issues going on within the company, and eventually we start to see just how much of a fraud Elizabeth Holmes really was and really is, and really dive deep into what really made her this way and sort of like the eventual consequences this has on her. So there's something very strange going on within TV right now, and I don't really know where this started, but there just seems to be this weird sort of fascination with these young sort of, Silicon Valley, con artists, essentially. Like, they started this company and it seemed legit, and then turns out they were exposed and they turned out to be like, these very just corrupt people, and The Dropout is one of those many shows, and it's also the one that I was probably the most excited for. I thought the show had a lot of potential behind it. Elizabeth Holmes, I've heard the name before. I've heard a lot about just how much of a con artist she is and how much of a sociopath she is and things like that, but I didn't really know like the full depths of what she really did, why she is, why everyone dislikes her as much as they do. I just knew that she did a lot of unethical shits, and I was excited to see, how that was really going to turn out in the show. I thought the show had a lot of potential behind it, and thankfully, this show very much delivered for me. The Dropout is such a fascinating and appropriately dark show that really does such a great job of exploring who Elizabeth Holmes really is, but also has so much to say about like the negative side of like, entrepreneurs and things like that. But we are just getting into right now. And easily one of the biggest interests in the show, at least for me, was the acting here. And everyone really does kill it in the show. I think everyone is just really well cast here. But we have to talk about Amanda Seyfried, who, look, she's given some really great performances before recently in like Mank and things like that. She really has shown just how great of an actress she really can be. But my God, I don't think she's ever been this good before, because she really just transforms into this role in a way that I don't think you're prepared for. The way that she does such an excellent job of going from Elizabeth Holmes, her more socially awkward self in her younger years, to then becoming this very dark and almost emotionless, businesswoman that is the person that Holmes wanted to be, the person that she felt people needed her to be. Seyfried just absolutely kills it here. She is so cold and conniving, and you are utterly terrified of her at points, but at the same time you are so deeply fascinated by her as a character. You can't take your eyes off the screen whenever she is entering the room. There aren't a lot of moments where the focus isn't on her, and she really just commands this entire show. I loved what she ended up doing here. What I also really love, though, is that she doesn't try to just play a character here. She is not trying to do an imitation of Elizabeth Holmes. She really is trying to understand the complexities of this character, the nuances, really just understanding all of that, but also pouring all of this emotion into it that really gets you to understand why people were so susceptible to her schemes. And I really love what she ended up doing here. She was just absolutely phenomenal throughout this entire show. And if there is any justice in the world whatsoever, she absolutely needs to be nominated for an Emmy for this show. I think this is easily the best performance she has given so far, and I was just so consistently impressed by what she ended up doing. I think she towed that line perfectly between this very heartless and very sadistic kind of, scammer, but also giving you a sense of, you know, this more sort of genuine side of Elizabeth Holmes and who she really wanted to be. I think she combined those two things very well, and I was very impressed by what she ended up doing here. She absolutely carries this entire show, and I think the show really is worth watching just for her, but it is just worth watching alone for her performance. But as good as Amanda Seyfried is in the show, you really should not be sleeping on Naveen Andrews, who I feel like has not been getting enough credit, and he really should be, because he is absolutely incredible as Sonny Baldwin, someone who was so loyal, so devoted to Holmes. Even when she was at her lowest, he still tried to support her throughout the entire thing, but yet at the same time, he is just as manipulated as everyone else in the show, yet he has so little awareness of it, and that's what really draws you to Sonny as a character, and Andrews just does such a great job with that. You are just as terrified of him, again, because of how much he sticks by Holmes throughout all of this, but at the same time, you understand how he is really also kind of like a victim in this situation, and I love what he ended up doing here. The love that these two have, it's so, like, twisted and things like that, and I thought that they really had such an interesting sort of back and forth then. The chemistry is really well done, kind of seeing the control that Holmes had throughout this entire thing. I thought both of them just did such an incredible job in this show, but the rest of the cast also is equally phenomenal here. Stephen Fry, oh my god, such a heartbreaking performance. I can't really get into why, but my god, I mean, if you just look up the character that he's playing, there are many scenes with them that just absolutely just tore my heartstrings out, and I loved what he ended up doing in the show. He was easily one of the biggest standouts for me. Dylan Minnette comes into the show a little bit later on, but he proves to be a really big standout, especially when you understand the role that he's going to play within the show. Sam Waterson is really great here. I really liked what he ended up doing. Laurie, Metcalf, and William H. Macy are really great as kind of like the first few kind of whistleblowers in this situation. I really liked the roles that they ended up playing here. Really everyone, even people like Alan Ruck, who aren't in the show a lot, they still does leave an impact here. I don't think there's a single actor in the show that didn't leave something on this series. There's so many actors that are in here, maybe only for 1 or 2 episodes, but yeah, they still leave a big impact, and I really think everyone just did such a incredible job here. Alright, but now we have to get into the directing for this show, which a show like this is very hard to direct, and I've noticed this a lot when it comes to a lot of these, you know, con artist shows, and I'll get into the other ones a little bit, but the one thing I have noticed is that you really have to try to walk that fine line between getting us to understand who this character is, but also not trying to glorify any of the really fucked up shit that they did. And Meriwether perfectly understands that. This show is very dark, yes, but it also has this very twisted sense of humor throughout it, and I thought that was a really good way to kind of just like take the edge off everything. It's very slight, but I'm glad that it's in there because it really kind of does show, you know, the way that these characters were able to go, you know, the way these characters were able to kind of calm themselves during this whole sort of situation. But the darkness, I mean, you really do feel throughout this entire show. At points, you feel yourself are getting played by Elizabeth Holmes and everything that she's doing. And I think that the directing here from Meriwether, she just did a really good job with really just understanding the way to direct this show. But you can also see that she has a lot of passion for this specific subject. And the thing that I think is also very hard is that there's still a lot left going on with this specific case. The actual, like, you know, verdict and things like that hasn't been determined yet. And so that can be very hard to try to write because you're kind of writing yourselves into a corner. And Meriwether still finds a way to keep this incredibly riveting throughout, and I really like the way she ended up directing the show. But getting into the writing here, I mean, that's the other thing that works very well. I want to talk a lot about the way the show characterizes Elizabeth Holmes, because what I think this show does better than most of the other shows that I will eventually talk about, some of which I'll probably be talking about later in the week, is that I think the show just has a better understanding of how to portray someone like this. Because we start off, and yeah, we do see Elizabeth Holmes in a little bit more of a positive light, but it's mostly us kind of getting a glimpse at who she really could have been. You know, she starts off and she's fresh out of, you know, she's, you know, right in getting into college, and, you know, has this intellect that is way beyond her years. She's going into classes that she's not supposed to be in and kind of correcting people and things like that. She's coming up with all these crazy ideas. She's hyper focused on becoming the next like Steve Jobs and things like that. She has so much potential and ambition, but she basically throws all of that away to create this company that really isn't going to do her any good whatsoever. And I thought this was a really good way of getting us into who Elizabeth Holmes really could have been. She's so different in the beginning of the show from how she eventually does turn out. She's so much more like socially awkward, but she's also a lot more like, you know, soft-spoken and things like that. And when you get to her eventually creating this company and taking on this whole new like cold and darker persona, you know, wearing these like, you know, black turtlenecks, speaking in this lower voice, it's like she has this whole other demeanor to her, yet it still feels like the same character, because you understand this is what she feels she needs to do to get ahead, even if she is constantly deceiving people, even if she knows that the tech that she has invented does not work, has all of these sort of pratfalls to it. She still feels this is the only way she's going to become successful, that she's going to be able to become the next Steve Jobs, and you really are able to understand her in that way. The show never once tries to downplay any of what she did. The show never tries to justify any of what Holmes did, but it really does get you to understand her and really get you to, you know, get a sense of how she really was able to fool everyone. There are so many points in this show where it is obvious that the thing that she's trying to do doesn't make sense. It is not a well thought out idea. It's very thinly sketched. The idea of Theranos, this company that seemingly can take like small amounts of blood and cure cancer and things like that. That sounds insane, and it is, because it doesn't. It's not workable. And Holmes is well aware of that throughout the show. Yet she is consistently still tricking companies into buying her product and, you know, marketing her product and things like that. And it's just really sickening to watch. But yet the reason you're so drawn to her is because you understand that to her, she doesn't think she's doing anything wrong. She thinks that she is this great sort of, you know, this great inventor, that she's this inspiration for, you know, women and things like that, standing up to feminism. But we can see when that veil is, you know, pulled out and we see who Elizabeth Holmes really is, we can see that all of that is very much a lie. Everything that she's doing is very much built on a lie, and I think the show did do a really good job of just really getting us into this character. It created this sort of tragedy to her character where it's like, if she hadn't dropped out of college, her life could have turned out very differently. Maybe she doesn't turn out to be, you know, the corrupted fraud that we know her as now. Maybe she could have gone down a different path in life, and that's something I really appreciate in this show, is that it didn't try to just, you know, it didn't try to portray her as this one-note sort of person. Like, it tried to portray every single facet of who Elizabeth Holmes really is, and I thought that just added to, eventually, you know, when she gets to that villainous point, it just added to that menace overall, because you could see why she was so motivated in that way, and I thought they did a really great job with that on this show. But the other thing that really impresses me about The Dropout, that I can't say about really any of these other scammer shows, spoilers by the way for when I eventually review those, is that while, yes, we focus a lot on Elizabeth Holmes, we put just as much emphasis on the victims that are constantly tricked into going along with her schemes in this show. And it's not just like we see them for a little bit and then, you know, we mostly just see how she reacts to it. No, we actually do get to see the impact that this has on them. And that added this whole other layer to the show for me that I really did appreciate when it comes to characters like, say, you know, Minnette's character, Tyler, who enters. You know, we get to see how excited he is to be a part of this at first, and when he starts to realize, you know, just how again, just how poorly run everything is and how terrible these people are that Elizabeth has put into these positions, you really do get to see the effect that this has on him. Or if we're following Stephen Fry's character, the effect that this has on him. I think the show just did a really excellent job with that. Part of the appeal of this show for me was seeing these characters react to what they exactly signed up for, not realizing what they were actually being a part of, that they were conned in that way. And, we actually get to see the aftermath of them being conned. And that's something I really did appreciate in this show. I think they did a really excellent job with that here. Because yes, for a while it is very much focused on how is this affecting Elizabeth, how is she playing into this, how is she constantly, getting ahead. But as the show goes on, we really do start to see these victims kind of speak out and want to do something about this to bring her down. And you are just as much into, their whole purpose to this as you are Elizabeth. And I thought they did a really excellent job with that in this show. And when we're focusing on, Elizabeth and her relationship with Sonny, it's very interesting to watch the way this all goes down, because she initially meets him when she's in college, and like I said, he's kind of the person sticking by her through all of this. But even as, as the show goes on and he starts to realize, what she's really done, even he starts to have doubts. And that's something that you also are very much drawn into is really seeing how that relationship, what does this mean to her? Is this just another person that she can manipulate, or does she really care for Sonny? That's something that is a bit unclear to us, and normally that would be a complaint for me, but I like that this show doesn't always give us those answers. It really wants us to kind of draw our own conclusions when it comes to Elizabeth Holmes, and I think that's something that they did a really excellent job with here. And again, we really do start to see Theranos as a company, how it really just kind of starts to ruin everyone, tarnish everything that these people care about, and it makes for some really devastating moments. And here's the thing, yeah, this show at times can be a bit fact-based, but what I think worked really well is, again, the show focuses a lot on the reactions that these characters have. It doesn't feel like a Wikipedia entry. It feels like we are getting a full exploration of what really happened here, whether it's, some sort of issues with the product and things not being ready, but Elizabeth still deciding to manufacture it regardless. Whether it's people that are on board that really should not be, that have a very bad reputation behind them, but Elizabeth still hires them because, oh, well, she thinks this is going to make her, that much more popular in that way. She's going to get that much more notoriety for this. Whether it's the people that are constantly just pushed around and abused in this show. They do such a great job, I think, with really just giving you a full exploration of what really went on behind the scenes, really just showing just how terrible of idea Theranos really was in the first place. And I really love the way all of that turned out in this show. There are so many moments in the show where you're just questioning, like, why would anyone go along with this? Why would anyone think this is a good idea? But then you see the way that Elizabeth, talks about it, or the way that she, the way that she goes about, discussing everything, and you understand why people were so easily swindled into what she was doing. Even if it didn't make any sense, she still had a way to con people, and I thought the show just did such a incredible job, because like I said, at points you yourself feel like a victim in this scenario. You feel like you're being played in the way that you start to care for Holmes in that way, and I thought they did an amazing job with that in this show. And again, I want to reiterate, the show really does do a great job of taking the characters that we see early on in the show, who we might see in a way where, they are a bit demeaning. We actually get to see how they were right about a lot of the concerns they had when it came to Elizabeth. Laurie Metcalf's character is a perfect example of this. She starts off as this teacher who doesn't seem to respect her that much, kind of sees through everything, and as the show goes on, we start to realize that she was very much in the right for calling her out about these things because, again, Elizabeth did not really, she had no sort of idea of what she was really getting herself into. She was so in over her head throughout this entire thing, and I think the show does do a really strong job with that. So overall, I just think the writing is really well done for this show overall. But let's get into the cinematography because that's something else I think is really well done when it comes to this show. There are points of the show that are very hard to watch, but I thought the cinematography, everything was like very well filmed here. They did a really good job when it came to that, especially the recreations. There is a other part of the show where we're frequently cutting to a 2020 interview that Elizabeth ended up doing. I believe it was in like 2017, and the recreations of that are so well done. You literally forget that this is Amanda Seyfried. You feel like you're just watching the interview as like archival footage, and they did such an amazing job in like recreating that. So I thought, the cinematography overall was very well done here. The score also is very good. There's a really good soundtrack to this show that doesn't try to overpopulate it in any way. I thought they did a good job when it came to the score here. And the editing, the show is 8 episodes long, and I think for the most part it is very well paced. I think there are some moments where it does drag a bit, but overall I was very impressed when it came to that. Now, I do want to talk about some flaws that I have with the show because the show isn't perfect. There are some characters that just, I felt needed a little bit more to them. Michaela Watkins is a good example of this. I felt there needed to be a bit more going on with her character, and things like that. I wish we had more to characters like Alan Ruck. Episode 4 is mostly centered around his character and also Stephen Fry's, and I wish we could have gotten a little bit more in depth with him because I felt that his character wasn't as well developed as he could have been. And the only other issue I do have with the show is that it does end a bit unsatisfyingly, but that's not really their fault. As I said, there is a large part of this that still hasn't been resolved. The actual verdict and like the true consequences of what's really going to happen to Elizabeth Holmes and to Theranos as a company, that's not something that's been dealt with yet, so they kind of have to end the show in the way that they did. But I do think the way the show wrapped up did overall satisfy me. I understood why they chose to end the show in the way that they did. It's just, you always have that hope that maybe they could have ended this in a more, concrete way, because again, there's still a lot of things that are still a bit unresolved, but they do have another adaptation in the works with Kate McKinnon, and I kind of wonder what they're going to be able to do with that, because I doubt what they do with that film is going to be nearly as successful as the show is, because ultimately the Dropout is very effective in what it does. It does a really good job of representing someone who, was a real hopeful and then just all came crashing down in the end. Someone who was just way in over her head and became this very sociopathic, colder version of herself, but also how she was able to kind of manipulate everyone into going along with her schemes. Amanda Seyfried is just pitch perfect in this role, so cold and calculating, downright terrifying at points, but also so compelling to watch throughout. It's a very riveting series, especially seeing the effect that this had on all of the victims that were also just, thrown into this whole thing. It doesn't try to cut corners in any way. It really shows just how problematic of a idea Theranos really was in the first place, and really just a lot of the things that gotten overlooked that very much shouldn't have. Overall, I think the show did a really good job in what it needed to do. It can be a bit fact-based at points, but I think for what it does all of it very well. I think that this is a show that you're going to find yourself very riveted by. I think that it got a lot more out of the show than it needed to, and really is just as grim and depressing as it really did need to be. And I think when it comes to a lot of these scammer shows, this show easily finds a way to be the best out of all of them. It really does a great job in taking Elizabeth Holmes and giving us this very fleshed out portrayal of her, but also really holding her accountable for all of her misdeeds and everything that she ended up doing, and the downright evil behavior that she displayed. So overall, I was very impressed by The Dropout, and I am going to give it an A-. So overall, guys, in my review of The Dropout, let me know what you guys saw of the show overall. Love your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.